Welcome to the Marcelo Simon Show. My name is Zenani Sitole, and I'm currently here with Marcelo Simon himself, as well as a current member of the NEC, the former Minister of Home Affairs, as well as Finance and Public Enterprise, Malusi Gigaba himself. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks, himself.
Good, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So it has been a long journey. Last year, I think it was last year we spoke.
Yes.
It was a virtual interview, so it's a huge improvement for us to have you in person. Looking back to where you're coming from, I thought after resigning in 2018, maybe you'll be in KZN tending cows and all the stuff. So right now you are here with us, which shows you have been busy. So just a quick review. What have you been busy with lately?
Look, I'm busy with politics. I'm involved in various political programs of the African National Congress, but I also am involved with youth development programs, engaging young people. I'm quite interested in youth leadership development, because I know that during our time, the ANC had invested a lot in developing our leadership skills and expertise. And I believe that we still need to do a lot of that in developing the leadership potential and capabilities and competencies of the younger generations. And that's what I'm involved in.
Yeah, no, that's great. But I'm kind of more interested before we dive too deep into this conversation. I just more interested in knowing your childhood, because it's said that our childhood experiences shapes us into the people that we become in life. So I just want you to paint me a picture of the young Malusi Gigaba.
I was born to a nurse. My mother was a nurse, and my father was a priest, an Anglican priest. I grew up in a family of 5 children, and we lived with our grandmother, we lived with both our parents. So I grew up in a religious environment. My parents cherished education a lot and insisted on us getting educated, and they sacrificed everything to ensure that they fulfilled that dream of us. I was fortunate, I think we were fortunate with my siblings, that our parents had a vision of what they wanted us to be, and they lived to fulfill that vision with regard to each and every one of us. And so I was lucky that I was sent to school. I went to university. I obtained a master's degree when I was still quite young. And so that was my childhood. It revolved around religion, education, and later in the mid 1980s, I started getting involved in politics. Experienced my first school boycott in 1986, beginning of the year. Got involved in youth organizations in Dundee Sibongile Township, and then went to boarding school. I became active again in politics when I went to university, the former University of Durban Westville. It's now the Durban Westville campus of UKZN. And that's when my leadership capability really began to shine. And I got involved with the ANC Youth League. I was a member of its provisional regional youth committee when it was re-established. Those of us who were selected to serve in its leadership positions. I subsequently became the president of the ANC Youth League for 8 years, serving 3 consecutive terms. Became a member of the ANC NEC directly in 2002, but I had been a member of the ANC NEC from 1996. So I've been a member of the NEC of the ANC for
6 years.
26 years.
The long-serving servant of the ANC.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the longest serving members of the ANC NEC.
Having had a background in politics, what can you say, and do you have any commentary on the fact that South Africa has been grey-listed? And can you make a comment on what it means to be grey-listed and the state of corruption in our country, as well as how we can get out of this?
Basically, the problem arises from South Africa has joined the various organizations that are fighting against money laundering and tax evasion. We have made commitments with regard to how we are going to fight that. That includes establishing legislation in the country, establishing the Financial Intelligence Center, ensuring that we have various ways, which include the banks, to ensure that we prevent money laundering and tax evasion. You will know that the African continent loses billions of dollars per annum from tax evasion and money laundering. A lot of money that leaves the continent through illicit activities that gets saved banked in foreign banks. I don't want to mention countries. So we've made commitments to be part of that effort. And in terms of of that effort, we have committed that we are going to be transparent in terms of our fight against that. And we're going to ensure that everybody involved in money laundering gets punished. And that's what grey listing is about. It means that we have lagged on the commitments that we have made to the Financial Action Task Force, which is called FATF, and that's why we've been grey listed. Now, the impact of that is that the perception of corruption in our country becomes negative towards investment. It becomes negative towards South Africa's international credit rating. It becomes negative in terms of various perceptions of the country, including corruption perceptions and perceptions of our commitment to fight corruption. And so the country, having made strides in fighting corruption and all of these ills, has taken a serious knock. And I think certainly conversations about the events at Pala and all of those things, and the failure or unwillingness to account for what happened there has only served to heighten the perceptions of corruption, of money laundering, of illicit storage and usage of money in the country, foreign currency, and failure to account for how that foreign currency in cash ended up entering the country, and why it was not accounted for with the South African Reserve Bank, and why it was stored in couches and beds. All of those things have made South Africa not to look good, and I think it really behoves all those responsible to take the necessary action to account for all of this, and then to say to us, because it's not sufficient to say that no, it was private money. But the fact of the matter is, how did it enter the country? Why was it not accounted for? How did it enter the country in complete defiance of the legislation relating or governing the entrance into the country of foreign currency in cash? All of those things need to be accounted for, so that here we have one example, one case that is tangible, which we must deal with forthrightly, to ensure that we give confidence to the international bodies and foreigners that indeed in South Africa we are dealing with cases where there is money laundering, there is tax evasion, because all of those things I think apply in this instance.
Sorry to interject. There is this view to say that most of the ANC members or people in the government, previously or currently, most of the time when they are convicted with a certain kind of crime, or maybe they are suspected of being involved in some of illegal activities. They just go through the process of hearing, and later on, there's nothing that happens, back to business as usual. So, do you think that the state is playing a huge role in setting example in those who are involved in activities which are not considered legal or moral?
I think there are many people who are members of the ANC and who are prominent in the country who've been charged, some of them found guilty of wrongdoing. I think the problem arises when convictions or when people are arrested without sufficient evidence having been collected, or when people are being charged in cases which seem more like politically trumped charges than actual charges, because in that instance you then have no evidence. All you are trying to do is to tarnish a person's reputation and profile. It's necessary that the law enforcement agencies should act with the necessary caution when people are charged, so that you don't charge people against whom you have no evidence, because all that does is to tarnish the reputation of those law enforcement agencies, including prosecutions agencies. The problem in our country is that we have had for a considerable period of time allegations of improper use of law enforcement and prosecutions agencies to politically prosecute people, rather than to prosecute them on the basis of the evidence that has been collected. I think a lot of the people who are who against whom we could have taken action, if I could mention Steinhoff case, for example, have not been taken action against. Instead, that group has lent money or given grants to the prosecutions agencies to investigate them. It's quite clear that they're not going to be found guilty, or no serious prosecutions are going to take place in that case, given that they are the sponsors of their own investigations. So there is a need for our law enforcement, our criminal intelligence, as well as our prosecutions agencies to act with all the necessary caution to bring about successful prosecutions. But I think we could say there have been many successful prosecutions in the country involving in even high profile people.
Yes, and but there's some cases, like there's a lot to talk about this one. Like we have the issue of the late the former player of Pirates, the goalkeeper, Meyiwa Senzo Meyiwa. We have the issues of the late Chris Hani. Still today, people want closure. So there's a lot that we can talk about. Where I look, when I look and reflect on the events occurred, I feel like there's no justice. But for the sake of time, I would like you to make comments on the recent issue where the president just announced to the public a new cabinet of ministers, adding to the current one that we have. I know, for an example, we have a minister of electricity, which electricity is a huge problem. But looking at this cabinet of ministers, some department are two deputy ministers and all the stuff, and not forgetting the previous events. We are coming from a very tumultuous 2 years of COVID-19. Does the states really have the money to pay those ministers? And do we need all the departments that we have, the ministers and the number of the deputies that they have?
Let me just wrap up first the question you were asking by saying, with regard to high profile cases, whether it's criminal or corruption related, we've got to urge our law enforcement and prosecutions agencies to work hand in hand with their criminal intelligence agencies to bring to a successful end all of those cases. And they need to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, so that they are successfully dealt with and no questions are left hanging with regard to what actually happened. With regard to the Chris Hani case, we certainly would like to know who was behind the hand that pulled the trigger. Because prosecuting Janus Walus, Clive W. Lewis, Gay W. Lewis was not sufficient for us to give us a sense of understanding of who gave the instruction for those for Chris Hani to be killed, who else was on the list of the people to be killed, and whether the people involved in giving those instructions back then are not still alive, giving further instructions about who else needs to be eliminated, because that was a clear elimination of a person who would have been very influential in the future of South Africa from that future. Are those people not involved again in eliminating others, either through false accusations, through assassinations, and other means, so that there are certain people who must not be part of the future of South Africa? Because there is a sense that in our country, what we refer to as white monopoly capital is deeply involved in shaping the future of South Africa and who should be part of that future in terms of political and economic leadership of the country. And so we need to know all of these issues so that we are able to be comfortable that the leaders we have at any given point in time are the leaders that we have actually chosen ourselves, who have not been selected for us by faceless individuals sitting somewhere in farms in Stellenbosch or somewhere in the capitals of the UK or Washington, but it's people that we have selected ourselves who have our best interest at heart. Now, moving on to the question you have asked about the size of the cabinet, let me say the size of the cabinet must never be determined through emotional outbursts or by adhering to certain ideological prescripts. You see, the neoliberals would want us to have a lean and mean government that doesn't play any role in the economy, that has no influence on what the markets do, and that has no ability to correct the failures of the markets. So they would want our states to be small, to be weak, to be ineffective, and for redistribution to be left to the devices of the market. Whereas, on the other hand, the size of the cabinet must always be determined by the size and scale of the problems we are facing as a country, the ideological outlook of a government in power in terms of what it wants to do and how it wants to do it. So for neoliberals to try and impose on us a general view which must be universally accepted about how big or how small the government should be is unacceptable. The ANC has a mission not only to liberate the country, but to change it altogether, to change the social and economic structures and relations of apartheid colonialism. That requires that we must have a minister of housing, because you can't leave housing provision to the poor in the hands of the market. We must have a minister of public enterprises, because a South Africa that is liberated from apartheid doesn't have the new social forces that now become the rulers of the country, at least politically, do not have an economic base through which to transform the country. They rely on the base that has been provided by the state through state-owned enterprises, who must be managed efficiently and effectively, so that whilst they are commercially viable, they are also able to deliver deliver on developmental objectives such as electrification. The electrification of rural areas would not have happened without Eskom and therefore the Ministry of Public Enterprises. The provision of roads in rural areas, the provision of water would not have happened without the Ministry of Water. So
I'm really sorry, sir. Talking about electricity and water, I'm sorry to say this, but it's truth. Since 2017, when President Ramaphosa came into power, there are some municipalities like J.S. Moroka, Thembisilihani, Elias Mtwaleni, where since then they don't have running water. since then, load shedding has become a norm. So I think this issue of water, running water, electricity, and housing, it's considered one of the most failures of the current government. I like during the time of Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, sorry to say that, President Jacob Zuma, things were better. Like load shedding was happening seasonal. Right now it's a norm. Water, running water, we used to have running water, maybe in a few days, a month, or few weeks, but water was there. But now, since 2017, is something that I know. I know. So this issue of water and electricity, sir, I think right now the government is failing so hard in addressing these three.
Let me say, the we were successful from 1994 to provide water to far-flung areas in rural areas, villages, in townships and everywhere, giving people clean running water, ensuring that every household has access to clean water. That includes electricity. Our problem with electricity started just a little bit back. Now, I don't want to go into the whole history of how the electricity problem started, but let me say we had solved the problem of electricity. We had actually announced in 2015 that there will no longer be any load shedding in the country. And so the problems that we are sitting with today, it's very important, as you correctly say, for government to be forthright and honest with the public with regard to what is the source of the load shedding that we had said we had solved. I hear all the arguments about energy availability factor, about the supply-demand imbalance. I hear including the appointment of the Minister of Electricity. But the question is, what is the source of the problems we are facing? And therefore, what is the best way to solve those problems? South Africa has capability to produce more than 40,000 megawatts of electricity per day. South Africa had sufficient power stations that would have provided electricity to us whilst the renewable energy suppliers came on board and were assimilated into the grid, whilst the two new power stations, Busile and Medupi, including Ingula in Ladysmith, were completed the construction. And for us to ensure sustainable supply of electricity, we needed a nuclear power station. But back in 2014, 15, 16, 17, there was this argument, this international lobby, including in the country, against nuclear energy. Yet, for South Africa, not only to power itself, but to power industry, not only to turn the lights on in houses, but to power industry and industrialize the economy, we needed baseload electricity, which could only be supplied by two main sources, either the fossil fuels, which is coal, or nuclear power, because renewable energy on its own is insufficient to power an economy, an industrialized economy such as South Africa's. Because when we look at the South African economy, it is very much linked to the minerals energy complex. It depends a lot on the energy sector. And so for the economy to be dynamic, to dynamize the economy, you need massive electricity, which is going to lead to industrialization and economic growth and distribution. So there have been serious problems over the last few years, and I still don't think we are providing solutions to those problems in the manner that could bring a complete end to our energy challenges. Let me say in conclusion to this question that the solutions which seem to have been favored a lot over the last few years, this heavy reliance on restructuring Eskom by breaking it up and privatizing energy generation and deferring energy generation to renewables, seems so much to favor American and European technology and skills.
Yes.
And it doesn't help us. It doesn't solve the problems that we are facing, or it doesn't serve the purpose for which ESCOM was created in the first instance. And so we need to deal with it in a more sustainable manner. And I don't think that the solutions that we have come up with up to now are sufficient, including the focus on the just energy transition outside of the ambit of ESCOM, because ESCOM needs to be at the center of the introduction of just energy transition in South Africa, and invest in research and in research and development of new sources of clean coal energy generation, ensuring that the technologies that can be provided by renewables can be found and developed within the country, so that we industrialize the South African economy. But for us to pursue an energy reform program that doesn't place industrialization of South Africa at its very heart is going to cripple the South African economy in the short, medium, and long run.
Looking back as your time as a former Minister of Public Enterprise and Finance, is there something you wish you had done differently or were able to accomplish?
I wish I had more time in both departments. The programs that we were pursuing at public enterprises were taking South Africa to a new level. ESCOM and Transnet in particular were driving a massive engineering, research and development and industrialization program, as a result of which we were investing in creating internal capabilities to develop fleet locomotives. We had developed a locomotives wagon for the automotive sector. I mean, not a locomotive, an automotive wagon for the automotive sector, which would have resulted in us removing the transportation of vehicles from the port of Durban and PE and East London away from road and putting them on rail, which would have saved the quality of our roads, resulting in less deaths. So it would have had many positive externalities. So, and the transformation program we were pursuing in terms of the consulting services, your audit firms, your black legal professions, your black marketing and advertising professions, up to higher level of transformation in fuel provision to ESCOM and Transnet, up to the coal procurement strategy that we had proposed for ESCOM, which would have resulted in about 41 billion rand per annum being transferred to black hands. All of those programs needed extensive support, and I wish I had more time to stay on to drive those programs. Likewise, at Treasury, one wishes we had more time to drive the programs of transforming the procurement policies and programs of government. If government was spending 800 billion rand per annum on procurement, we wanted to gradually, but quite fast, change the profile of the procurement towards black companies, towards women's companies, towards youth-owned companies, so that the South African economy, if you talk about the size of the South African economy being 4.3 trillion rand, we were saying that there needs to be a plan on how we are going to gradually transform the ownership patterns of that economy towards black people. It wasn't going to happen overnight. It would have needed a lot of time, and I think that it actually served particular interests for us to be quickly removed from that responsibility because of the transformation effect that our continued stay in those in particularly at National Treasury would have had.
during the time where you were serving as Minister of this, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Public Enterprises, Minister of Finances, you were so bold enough and you were so self convicted that one day God has chosen you to be the leader of this country. Tracing back to where you're coming from and where you are right now, looking at you're the one who knows the vision of Malusi Gigaba in the next 5 years, 10 years. You are the one who knows God talks to you about you, not us. So do you even today think and believe that God has chosen you one day to be that leader which you once spoke about?
Look, I'm not a demagogue. I wouldn't say that God has chosen me because I've got no such insight into God's mind. God could have chosen someone else. But as a young person, you believe in your capabilities. You believe that you can make a contribution somehow in the future of the country. And given the responsibilities which I had been given by President Mbeki and President Zuma, I had accumulated sufficient experience and internal knowledge, internal insight of government for me to feel that in actual fact, having served in the security cluster, having served in the economic cluster, having served in the governance and administration cluster, that I could play a role somewhat overall leading the country. It could still happen. It really pretty much depends on members of the ANC acting independent of the influence of money. Because at this present moment, many of the leaders we have been selected for us by either the money they have or the money of the people who want them to lead us. And so the influence of money, vote buying, all of those things are denying South Africa of the competent leadership whom they deserve, but giving us people who have been purchased for us, like at any retail shop.
With the 2024 elections coming up, do you have anything to say to the current youth about voting and potential activism, as well as their hope in the ANC?
I would say young people need to continue to be very active politically, not only in terms of airing their views, but particularly in terms of participation. The more young people, because the problem with many young people is, the South African youth are very politically aware. That much nobody can deny. They are politically aware and they've got strong political views. And their views are overwhelmingly progressive. That's what we need to admire. That's what the country needs to nurture. That's what we need to harness as we build a post-colonial society. Now, but we must move away from having views to being active, to taking action, to waking up in the morning on election day to go vote, and not just be critical of everybody and end up not knowing who is right or who can do, among all the bad people, who can be the better among them. Being critical is good, but you need at times to realize that only an armchair revolutionary can have perfect ideas about how to change society. But those who are actively involved in the daily practice of changing society are bound to make mistakes. They are bound to get dirty in the process of trying to do things right. And so young people need to give them the benefit of doubt and say, you are making mistakes. We can only fix these mistakes by getting into you, being part of you, and removing those who are doing bad things. But the vision of the ANC at this present moment remains unassailable. the creation of a non-racial society, non-racialism based not just on blacks and whites coexisting in South Africa and cohabiting the same country, but based on the actual transfer of material wealth into the hands of the black majority. Non-sexism, the genuine empowerment of women, the vision of democracy being available wall to wall, the vision of unity. Only the ANC has the capability to unite South Africa because it is able to appeal to the cross-section of South African society and make the necessary compromises that are able to carry everyone along with it towards the future that we want. Anybody else, you remove the ANC from the equation, the problem you are going to have is that you will have South Africa splintering into different splinter groups that are irreconcilable forever at each other's throats, fighting to the death without compromises being sought and achieved. And so people must give the ANC the benefit of doubt. Yes, we've made terrible mistakes in the recent past, but those mistakes, they are not new. In the 110 years of the existence of the ANC, 111 this year, the ANC would have gone through many moments when it made mistakes. In the 1930s, 1940s, we made mistakes. We began correcting them, and so we can self-correct. But we can also self-correct as a result of the active participation and the constructive criticism of the people of South Africa. But once our people do not go to vote, once youth don't go to vote, you are going to end up like in Tshwane, where you have a coalition government which is unstable. You don't know who is the mayor today. You don't know who will be speaker tomorrow. The example of Ekurhuleni, the example of Johannesburg. We need to vote in large numbers for the ANC for it to be able to continue carrying out the tasks of transformation without relying on seeking support from minority parties and having to compromise with them in the process so that we are able to change South Africa for the future.
Yes, see, now you are campaigning for the ANC. We must vote for the ANC.
No, I'm a member of the ANC. I cannot ask people to vote for anybody else. I can only ask them to vote for the African National Congress. It's the only one I know. It's the only one whose policies I know.
They must vote for the people that they believe are capable to lead them.
The ANC. You don't have to say the ANC. You must maintain your neutrality.
Yes.
I am partisan.
Yes.
I'm partisan and I cannot hide it. I'm known to be partisan and I am not going to change it.
Nah, it's okay, sir. You are ANC. You breathe yellow, green, black, and all this stuff. It's okay. I understand in your position, sir. Talking about the 2024 elections, which are around the corner, what can we expect from you, sir? I know lately you have disclosed when you're talking to Goli, when you're talking to Goli on Newsroom, that when you resigned in 2018, there were still instances where ANC trusted you to lead with some other portfolios, but because you said you had things to deal with, you humbly rejected the offers. And even now and again, you have been elected for some other portfolios. You are the long-serving I like to call you long-serving servant of the ANC, 26 years in the NEC. So still the ANC have hope in you, and I still believe that even some other South Africans around the country, they still believe in your ability to lead us. So what can we expect next year from you, sir?
I will actively participate. I will continue to actively participate in the campaigns, in political students and youth activities. Not only, as I've said, mobilizing them to support the ANC, but focusing on the development of youth leadership skills and competencies, because I think in that respect, we have the possibility, the greatest possibility to build our future leadership as a country. So I will, leading up to elections next year, participate. And what happens to me after the elections is really at the behest and pleasure of the members of the ANC. If they say I must go back to Parliament, I will consider it at that point whether I accept the deployment to go back to Parliament. If not, I will continue to serve the ANC. I'm loyal to it that much.
So I'm really sorry. I just want to trace back to the portfolios which you served during the uprising of Fees Must Fall, which is one of the most important events in the youth history of this country. You looking back at that, do you think that the government that was there in that time, including you as the minister, do you think you have addressed that issue well, or do you think that somehow in addressing that issue you failed to, as the collective government, think that the government felt didn't address properly that issue? Looking at the same thing is still happening every year at Wits University where we are today. We are marching down the streets. Last year, someone was killed at the beer street called Thokozisi Mtuba. Today, a few months ago or a few weeks ago, we were there with the same issue, marching for fees to fall down. Education is rising so high. The government, working with the universities, are making it so difficult for black people to attain degrees, to be professionals. And at the same time, they're talking about black empowerment. They want us to change our societies, yet they're making so hard. Not forgetting the vision of the organization which you developed. You are one of the founding fathers of that organization, which is called Student Society University of Durban Westville. You see, looking back at that vision and the issue of fees must fall,
I think we did what we needed to do in 2017 by announcing. See, President Zuma was faced with two options.
Yes.
One from the Ngasana report, and the second from the Heha Commission. But President Zuma felt that both these reports were still subjecting young black South Africans to the dictates of the financial institutions. And then he came to us and said, no, I want a different solution. I want a full scholarship for first to fourth years. I want to cancel the student debt. And this scholarship, he explained, needed to cater for tuition, for residence, for living allowances and transport allowances when in the instance that a student did not reside at residence. So we then said to the president that given the challenges, the financial challenges we were facing with, and the fact that back at the time, South Africa had a 40 billion tax shortfall, 40 billion rand tax shortfall. We said if we introduce, Comrade President, the cancellation of the student debt, we are looking at about 80 billion rand per annum that we must add onto the 40 billion rand tax shortfall. We said the economy would not cope with this level of debt. So let's first introduce fee-free higher education and then deal with the issue of the student debt at a later stage when the economy has picked up and revenue streams were much improved. But the problem that we were faced with was that we then had to find this 40 billion rand that we needed to provide for the fee-free higher education. And that's why we increased VAT. It was not the best option. We could have been given relief by the South African Reserve Bank had it been, first, owned by South Africans. Secondly, had it had as part of its mandate the growth of the economy and creation of jobs rather than the singular focal mandate of inflation targeting. And that is the issue that we need to deal with, because to deal with the problem of the funding of higher education on a sustainable basis, we need to find a way that relieves the taxpayer from having to foot the bill. Because in the context where the economy is not growing, unemployment is high, fewer people are paying tax, fewer people are able to purchase, the cost of living is rising. So fewer people are purchasing goods, including those, or particularly those that are VAT. So it means that the revenue that government should collect to pay for fee-free higher education is in itself constrained. But government should not be dogmatic in looking for solutions only from VAT or from revenue sources. It must go back to the South African Reserve Bank and say to it, here the problems facing our youth persist. Provide us with the relief that we need. Reserve banks, central banks of other countries do that, in India, in Brazil, in other countries. Their central banks provide relief to their governments to deal with urgent challenges in society. In our case, even today, economists are anticipating another increase in the repo rate, which will result in the increase in the interest rate. So our people are constrained, they are strained beyond imagination, and the genuine concerns of the poor, of the youth, of the students remain facing us starkly in the face. The Reserve Bank has got to come to the party instead of only trying to stop inflation and the rising cost of food.
Do you think the current government, after the President Zuma's government, the current government had the same vision with the previous government in terms of addressing the issue of education? And then secondly, the thing that the student command of Wits was fighting for. Number one, NSFAS kept the living allowance to 45,000 per annum. And then when you come to Wits races, you find that accommodation is around 50,000. You have to top up 5,000. You find that is around 70,000. You have to top up another sum of money. You find that it's 80,000. You have to top up 35,000. As an NSFAS student who's coming from parents who are not working, you don't have that 35,000 per annum to top up. So students were saying it's either NSFAS increase their living accommodation, or the university, which is Wits University, decide to absorb the debt to say, no, we will take that 45,000 coming from the government, but we are not going to charge you with this because you don't have money. So that was the challenge between the university, NSFAS, and student. So do you think also the government played a huge role in addressing the issue of student funding? The NSFAS issue is playing a huge role in addressing that.
I think we need to find a creative way to deal with this problem.
Yes.
One, if government makes the commitment that President Zuma wanted to make in 2017 with regard to the student debt, and government says, we will wipe the student debt out. It doesn't have to say we will wipe it out now. It can be next year, it can be in 5 years' time. But if government makes that commitment, it actually provides a guarantee to universities to say these debts that are there, government will settle them. It then relieves you as an individual student from having to incur the debt and carry that debt into your future. But in so doing, what government is also saying is that we are going to look for sources of funding away from the conventional sources, which is tax revenues. It then has to look at other streams, including the central bank, to say, provide us the loan, because the central bank is also the lender of the last resort. It is the lender of lenders. It can provide a loan to government at an interest rate that it can set itself, which is conducive to government fulfilling its promises to the nation. And in this case, the interests of the students are of such of such importance that it warrants that type of attention. But in doing that, government would not be giving a license to universities to act irresponsibly. Because if government simply says, we will absorb the student debt, then universities can raise, the university fees can just shoot through the roof. So government should be able to say, we will absorb the student debt, but do not raise student fees altogether beyond this quantum of percentage, so that this becomes a sustainable debt that we carry. And at the present moment, we carry a debt to IMF, to World Bank, to any other institution which is purported to solve our energy crisis. But here is a problem of the future that we need to deal with, which is the problem of education and the funding of higher education, the skills that we need, that we keep saying we don't have. But those skills are being suffocated in debt, inability to pay, and therefore they get excluded from universities. So there is a need. Now, without much pressure, yes, the pressure is there, but government needs to sit down and say, without much pressure, here is a package of solutions to the student funding crisis that we are facing as a nation, to deal with the student debt, to deal with responsible raising of fees by universities, and to provide funding to students on an ongoing basis, on a sustainable basis. I know in many universities that I've been to, old residences are dilapidated. But universities are focusing on building new residences. I guess there are kickbacks from there. Secondly, many first-year students spend months without receiving funding, going hungry for the first 2, 3, or 4 months without food, because NSFAS is not yet paid, and their parents are unable to provide them funding to buy basic living stuff. So we need to find a solution to this, so that the beginning of the year doesn't become a drain on young people. You are already away from home. You do not have the comfort of security that the family can provide, even if you personally don't have food. Where else are you supposed to get the food from? So we need to deal with these things and put ourselves in the feet of the students. And that's why I'm saying, whilst we have time, we must find a package of funding solutions that are going to lift us out of the current problem we're facing.
Sir, I'm so sorry, but there is a necessity for me to dwell much on education, because it's more personal to me. I'm a student. Currently, I owe the university 58K. I don't know, next year I will be able to register. By the end of the year, maybe my debts will be around 63 to 65,000 that I will be owing the university. When you come to this great hall, to this Solomon Mahlang building at 11 p.m. or 12 a.m., you'll find students, beautiful students. You'll find handsome, cute students. They're carrying a bag. They're looking for a lecture room to sleep on. In my first year, there was a guy who had a problem also with funding. He had this great engineering course that he wanted to do. He didn't have a funding. He was sleeping in the labs. A month later, if not two, he decided to drop out because the environment was so toxic for him to focus. So it's a personal matter for me, because I'm living with these challenges every day. And I feel like the government is there looking and watching it in TV news, saying that they're protesting again. One of the statements that one of the big members of the ANC made, he said these students, it's a way for them to get into higher position of the ANC, ignorant of the challenges that we are facing right now. There is a student right now that I'm talking to. She doesn't have funding. She's enrolled to start. She doesn't have accommodation. There is a guy also that I know I was talking to. He didn't have funding. He had to go and apply for loans and all the stuff. Coming to the issue of loan, it's a way also, according to me, for the government to oppress black people, to say, leave the university with 100,000 bill of your student debts that you owe. Leave the university with this sum of money for you not to focus on improving your life, taking your family out of poverty. You must focus on paying this debt. So, like, it's a challenge that I pose to you, to say, whenever you are with them, because you work together with them, Just bring these issues, make them to see the bigger picture. It's not about people trying to get to higher position of the ANC. It's something that we're getting into. And one of the things that the government or the ministers can ensure that they're addressing this issue. Ministers, they are getting high paid, a huge sum of money per annum. If someone like Fikile Mbalula can say, I wanna pay this debt for this student, it's a huge impact that he made. I know someone right now who is playing a huge role right now in the economy of the country and some other African countries, who his debts were being paid by the president of that time when he was a student. I know of last year when I went to Lutule House, they told me that there's this minister who paid the students' debts for this person. So this, even if you can say I want to pay for this one, it's a huge role. If, like, they must come with a concrete solution to say not every year these students they must be brutalized by the police. You see, that's my issue.
No, I agree with you. But the point I'm making is, instead of making it the responsibility of individual ministers or leaders, government must take the responsibility. Government has got the power to incur debt of the size and scale an individual cannot even imagine. And so government has got the power to say to universities, we will deal with this debt, we commit over this period of time to pay the debt out and wipe it out. Because it's not only about you as a student now, it's also about you as a young South African in the future. When you start your life, you've completed your studies, you go out to work. As you start working, whilst your white peers start their lives with guaranteed jobs, with accommodation, with homes or apartments paid for by their families, and perhaps even a car, you are starting with nothing but a student debt, back to which you need to start looking before you even get to today and start building a future. Now, if we want to deal with the problems of inequality in a concerted manner, we therefore need to deal with this problem of the student debt, not as a matter of populism. It's not a matter of populism. It's a matter of the genuine transformation of our society that we seek, the genuine empowerment of the black majority. And you cannot empower the black majority by empowering the elderly instead of the young, so that they begin to change the future through their effort and with the support of government and society as a whole. And that's why I'm saying I agree wholeheartedly with you. What I'm saying is, instead of looking at individual people and saying, because they themselves will come under pressure. If I pay your debt today, someone else comes and says, I also have a debt. As an individual, I'm unable to carry so much debt. But government has got the capability to even find the funding to wipe out the student debt. Because in 2017, in as much as we felt that the student debt was solvable, that government could wipe it out, we just faced a practical problem within a limited period of time. I remember my then advisor, Professor Chris Marikane, saying to me that, but Minister, I don't support raising VAT. I think we should call on the central bank to give us the money we need to deal with this funding, the fee-free higher education. Unfortunately, we didn't have much time to even do that, and the environment was rather hostile. So we need to now, with the benefit of time, to actually provide that sustainable solution to this problem.
You are saying the government has the capabilities, which I agree with you. Is this government interested in implementing those capabilities according to your own perspective?
I wouldn't know, because I'm not I'm not in the administration of the country. I'm part of the ruling party, but I'm not in government. I don't know what they discuss. I don't know what decisions they arrive at. But it's an issue that you have correctly said we need to continue to raise. Yes, we do raise this issue. Yes, we want an ANC government or the ANC government to make this genuine and practical commitment to say we will deal with this thing and this is how we're going to deal with it. Not just to say we will deal with it, because that just is empty talk, but to say this is how we are going to deal with it in the same manner that we did in 2017 when we said we are announcing free higher education. We're starting with the first years this in 2018. In 2019, we will go to the first and second years. Now that is practical. Everybody can see this is what we are doing. And in the budget, we then announce that this year there is so much money for the first years. Next year it will rise to this amount. Then it will go to that amount. Then it will reach that amount. Everybody can know over the fiscal the medium term expenditure framework. Everybody knows that this is what you are going to do. This is how you are going to do it.
Okay, so if fees must fall has been happening every year since 2016, right? So what has stopped the governments then from making that commitment that we will, that you will absorb the jobs, you will help the students, because this has been happening every single year. And I feel like in as much as you are asking for citizens to give you guys time to make mistakes, it's been happening for years. And by the time other people have already graduated from varsity. So what is stopping then the government from actually implementing sustainable ways and committing to doing that, as opposed to just saying that?
No, remember what I said, that in 2017 we made a very firm announcement. It was a bold announcement in the face of a huge tax shortfall, in the face of downgrading by ratings agencies, in the face. We were introducing a new debt that we had to go to ratings agencies, to international investors to explain how we were going to carry it. And so it was a very drastic and revolutionary announcement that President Zuma made in 2017, and then we outlined how we were going to implement it in 2018. The expectation was that in the years subsequent, government would then announce how it was going to proceed from the fee-free higher education to wiping out the student debt. I think there has been a gap in that regard. Unfortunately, some of the people who were there in 2017 are still there. They probably should have indicated that, actually, there was this commitment that in the subsequent years, we would begin to deal with the student debt. We have to deal with it. And I think the issue you are raising is we need to be a bit more robust, even those of us who are inside the leadership structures of the ANC, to raise this so that it finds articulation in the commitments of government. The problem is, among others, there has been this fight because when an economy is not growing and therefore you are not getting sufficient revenues, load shedding has resulted in a lot of SMMEs and other companies shutting down. There are, your economy has been downgraded and now grey listed. When you've been facing all of these problems, it's quite clear that the government is unable to stimulate growth in the economy, that the private sector itself is unable to stimulate growth in the economy. But when all other indicators, all other variables are not able to play a part to grow the economy, you then have to look at government. And government has to say to itself, how do we stimulate growth so that there is consumption, so that there is investments, so that there is all sorts of other things taking place. The economy starts to become active and dynamic again. And that is where we have to resolve the issue of the ownership of the South African Reserve Bank, the mandate of the South African Reserve Bank, the alignment of the macroeconomic policies of government, so that both the fiscal and the monetary policies all act towards the same goal of creating jobs and growing the economy. Right now, they are negating one another, because the fiscal policy says we want to create jobs, we are providing so much money to the poor to cushion them from poverty, but the monetary policy is actually actively increasing the cost of living by increasing the interest rates And so that imbalance has got to be addressed and fixed. So government is facing many dynamic challenges. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Being in government, you would wish you can take decisions quite easily, but it's difficult because it's a negotiation and bargaining between different factors, and many of those factors are quite powerful in themselves to be able to block the transformation that you need. But we need the ANC NEC to play the role that it must play, to put pressure on those sectors to act in the manner that is going to yield positive result.
Can I ask you to address the students then that have been not allowed to register, and the students sleeping, that are homeless, sleeping in labs, sleeping in toilets? What would you, as a member of the ANC and a member of the NEC, like to say to them?
I would like to say to them that we empathize and understand the difficulties and challenges that they are faced with, and that we are going to do all that we can to mobilize as much support for the necessary sustainable interventions and urgent interventions to be made that are going to alleviate their problems, not only during the course of this year, but on during the course of the foreseeable future.
Seb, thank you so much for coming here. What are your words to young people looking at the next coming year, 2024? It's a very important year to the country and to many other political parties. What are your words to young people in particular?
I would like to say to young people, the future is not an accident. You have as much responsibility not only to be critical about the present, but to shape in your mind the type of future you want and to act accordingly to realize that future. Bearing in mind that whatever you want to see, whatever vision you have of yourself in the future and your community and your society at large, is not going to be realized by you being an armchair critic. You need to make the necessary sacrifices today that are going to help you realize that type of future that you want, that are going to empower you and make you a competent contributor to the building of the future you want, because all of us must strive to ensure that we leave South Africa better than when we found it. And that is the responsibility we carry. There are many challenges that young people are faced with. The achievement of democracy has had many benefits to young people, but it has also left them with many challenges, some of which could very well be demotivating and disheartening. But what I would ask of the youth of our country, of the students at Wits University, is to be resilient, to be focused, to be hardworking, to be optimistic, and to continue to work hard for raising their level of education. You need to attain education no matter what obstacles have been put on your way, and you need to make a contribution to the development and transformation of our country, and remain progressive in your thoughts and actions.
So we need to play a very quick game. In 5 minutes we'll be done. I call it quick time. So in this game, I'm going to give you 3 names of people that you know. So you're going to share with us your personal experiences about one that you're going to pick from these 2, or you're going to share with me your views looking at their leadership capabilities. For an example, I have 2 names. It's Kanakana and Bonga Makani. I hope you know them, the members of the ANC. They're always on TV. They are involved more in just energy transition. They have an organization called SAYEC. So it's an economic forum that deals with every young people's challenges. So Bonga Makaya or Kanakana. To me, I would pick Kanakana. Not forgetting the capabilities that I would pick Bonga. Not forgetting the
I don't watch
capabilities.
the news.
But okay,
So
I'm just
maybe choose others.
no, I'm just making an example of these two. I will give you yours. So between Kanakana and Bong. So to me, I will choose Bong, not forgetting about the capabilities that Kanakana has. Bonga, it's more intimate to me because there's a time where I said to him, man, I'm inspired by what you do. You are always with the government and you are making sure that you share your values on how to address the challenges of energy crisis in the country. And he was like to me, one day you will also cross path and you will find something that you're going to do which will impact the country so positively. So for that, I would pick him. So for you, I have Khanyag or Tito Mboweni.
Tito Mboweni.
Why?
Because of his long years of service to the struggle, the sacrifices he has made, because of his forthrightness. Tito is not afraid, or Tito is not afraid to make controversial statements and to subject himself to criticism as a result of those commitments. When you are Minister of Finance, I mean, he's been deputy head of economic management department in the ANC. He's been the Minister of Labour, the Governor of the Central Bank, and even Minister of Finance. In all instances, he was never afraid to put forward controversial views so that he is subjected to criticism. I think in that way, you grow as a person in terms of your own intellectual and ideological outlook, and you are able to adjust and adapt your views to the criticism that you are receiving from other people. So I would say that Comrade Tito, for me, not to downplay the important role that Kganyago plays and has played in the past, because he also comes from the struggle. He's adjusted well to being the governor of the central bank. I knew him many years ago prior to even joining government. So in a way, he also is an important role player. But I think Pratito, and for also his affability, his charisma, he's a charismatic person with his fish cooking sessions. But he has a way of interacting with the people of South Africa and doesn't fear engaging them, whether in his political ideas or in his cooking.
Okay, and between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Jacob Zuma.
President Jacob Zuma, without a doubt. I think he also carries the charisma that we need. He epitomizes the struggles of the rural poor and the resilience of the rural youth and their ability to overcome adversity. For somebody who came from the village of Ngandla, who did not see the doors of a formal education institution, to rise to the level of president and be listened to by global leaders and other learned people, to have the confidence to lead the country the manner he did. I think he is someone who is worth following. But he also is not afraid to state his views. He doesn't try to be correct all the time. He doesn't try to be agreeable to whichever audience is listening to him. But he also epitomizes the cultural value systems of the African people. He's not shy to be African. He's not shy to be rural. He expresses that on world platforms, even when people criticize him.
Yeah, it's a quick time, so it has to be quick as much as possible. Ayanda Dlodlo or Blade Nzimande?
Sis Ayanda.
Why?
Sis Ayanda, she, as a woman, she has risen against adversity in the military structures of the ANC, in the camps, in exile, to be a commander. She has occupied important positions in the country, but also had the humility on several occasions to say, let me take a step back to go and pursue other things. At the current moment, she's serving the country in Washington at the World Bank. She left, say, the glitz and glamour of being a minister to go serve the country internationally. So I think she's sweet, she's humble,
Yes.
and
I
is a
will
good
go
leader.
with you for Ayanda Dlos. Dr. Blaine Zuma is a no-no for me. He failed to address the fees must fall issue since he came into power. So that's a huge no for
I
me.
fell into a trap here. I fell right into it.
Dr. Zweli Mkhize versus Ace Magashule.
Look, Dr. Mkhize would be my preference. Hardworking, he's humble, he's also made a massive contribution to the achievement of peace in KwaZulu-Natal. There was a time in KwaZulu-Natal where it was, unimaginable that we would have peace. And he was amongst the front echelons of bringing about peace in KwaZulu-Natal, and in the process risked his own life to ensure that. There were many times when they would have gone right into the beast of the belly where violence was rife to provide shelter, support to comrades who were in communities that were afflicted, that were under attack. But they also had the foresight to grow out of the hatred they might have accumulated, the anger they could have accumulated for the other side, to realize that we can work together with the IFP to bring about peace in KwaZulu-Natal. So I would go with him.
Sir, we need more of these personal experiences with them. Maybe someone who encouraged you when you were leading in some portfolios, someone who were there for
Tell
you
me,
during
I'll
hard
organize them
times.
for you.
Okay. Panyaza Lesuf or Angie Muter?
I'll go with Panyaza. For the first time, you are now selecting someone from my generation. And so I am definitely inclined towards Panyaza. He, for a young leader, I think he's done excellently, exceptionally well as an MEC for education. And I listened to his State of the Province address, his first State of the Province address. I must say, as Premier of Gauteng, I was most impressed by the vision that he articulated in that State of the Province address. If you want him sitting here, I can ensure that you get him to come sit here. I think he needs to explain himself to the youth of Gauteng who are studying at Wits.
Now I would like to have a chat with him. He has done exceptionally well. I agree with you. Done some incredible well, and with so much that he has done, I believe there is so much that he can still do as a Premier of Gauteng. So yeah,
he's inseparable from the future of South Africa.
Oh, just the last one. This one I know you don't have a personal relationship with them. This is the last one. Theo Baloyi or Vus Timbekwai?
That's a difficult one. Now this is one when I can't choose. I think I like both of them.
Yes.
They are outspoken. They are young South African. They're both business and social entrepreneurs.
Yes.
They represent the hopes and dreams and even the views of many young South Africans who are professional, who have aspirations to be in business. They are fearless in articulating their views, and they've done tremendous work in inspiring young people. So I go with both of them. I hope you don't mind.
I don't. Thank you so much, sir, once again for your time.
Thank you so much for letting us interview you. And that is it from the Marcelo Simon Show. Please do follow and comment and subscribe to our channel at Marcelo Simon Show.
Yeah, we'll
you.
see you in our next episode, and I won't stop talking until you're the one watching there. Subscribe and make sure that we continue doing this. Thank you. See you in our next interview. So,
Thank you.
really appreciate it. We are very poor community.
You
Zenani,
were hard on me
snaps.
today.
No. Zenani, quick snap with the camera. Yeah, quick snap, just a few
No,
snaps.
it's good. It's good. You that's how you must be.
Yeah. Do it again. They didn't believe in us.
But God did.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Zenani. Oh, quick snaps. A close up also. Another medium. Another